Morning. Well, today we continue our journey with Jesus in Luke as we head towards the cross. We have journeyed with Jesus as he was tempted. We've heard the call of Jesus to follow him and be fishers of people. We have seen Jesus as he has taught this good news that the kingdom of God is for everyone, regardless of your race or your upbringing or how much you have in the bank or how holy you are. A kingdom where fishermen are called to proclaim it. A kingdom where the faith of even a centurion is enough to heal. The kingdom of God is growing. It is including the outsiders. It is bringing justice. It has turned the world upside down. Luke gives us this beautiful image that following Jesus is a journey that you follow as you live your life, a journey where you learn as you go and as you live. So the kingdom of God was growing on the roads with apostles and disciples and followers, all following Jesus as he teaches and heals and forgives and tells stories. So today we're headed towards the final part of Jesus' ministry. Here at the end of chapter 9, we reach a turning point in the Gospel of Luke. Jesus has been traveling around from village to village. He's been preaching the good news of the kingdom of God, that all are invited to be a part of this kingdom. Jesus has been teaching justice and mercy and love. Jesus has been healing people regardless of their faith backgrounds. The message of the kingdom of God is spreading and people are flocking to listen to Jesus. His disciples are growing in number and the news about Jesus has traveled. And here in chapter 9, things begin to shift in this journey. There is now a new focus. Jesus now is headed to Jerusalem, his final journey. He knows what's going to happen there, and you and I know what happens in the coming days after that journey. Once Jesus gets there, he'll be betrayed, arrested, and killed. Even Jesus has predicted this outcome to those listening, but the disciples don't understand what he's saying. As we encounter this intentional shift in direction to Jerusalem, we also see Jesus intentionally shift his focus in ministry. As Jesus continues on this journey, we see him continuing to invite and teach his disciples, but the focus isn't just the kingdom of God anymore. It isn't just the good news or Jesus as a teacher and a healer. Now we see Jesus focusing in on his ministry as the Messiah. As Jesus heads to Jerusalem, everything that happens from now on involves some risk. Jesus is no longer just foreshadowing his own death. He is taking up his calling and following God, even at the cost of death. And as Jesus journeys, we see Jesus zero in on discipleship. He invites his disciples to understand exactly what is required to follow him. And by following this call that he's been given, Jesus is showing his own disciples what it costs to follow. So in chapter 9, as Jesus and his disciples leave the Samaritan village and continue this journey to Jerusalem, they encounter 3 people on the road. Each of the 3 wants to be a disciple of Jesus. Now, this probably happens all the time. After all, Jesus was offering hope and unity and belonging. And we all want that in our lives. And while you and I would expect Jesus to be excited, tell them, come on board, let's make this official, Jesus seems to discourage them. The first person comes to Jesus and boldly declares, I will follow you wherever you go, Jesus. Now that sounds pretty good to me. If I met someone for coffee and they said, Cynthia, I'm ready to follow Jesus and I'll follow him wherever he leads me, I would jump to invite them to join us here at Stanford on their journey. This person says they want to be a follower of Jesus. They're ready to come to church to see what this journey with Jesus is all about. But following Jesus is more than just showing up and blindly following, and Jesus wants the person to know this. Jesus knows that there is more to this life than just following. There is a cost to journeying with Jesus. After all, Jesus knows where this road they are on is headed, and it is not for the weak of heart. So Jesus challenges the person when they say that they will follow Jesus anywhere. Foxes have dens, birds have a nest, says Jesus, but I have no home to call my own. I don't know where I'm going to sleep tonight, says Jesus. Will you leave behind the comfort and security of your home? Will you really go wherever I go, regardless of the sacrifice or the inconvenience? Do you know what might be asked of you, what you might have to give up? And here's what I think Jesus is really getting at. Do you value your home and the work over the work of the kingdom that I have invited you to do? I really like being at home. I like to sit in my den with a blanket over my lap and a little snuggly puppy next to me while I read a book and drink some tea. I like to be on the back porch when the weather's nice and play card games with Kale. On my day off, I love to cook in the kitchen and make some homemade pasta and spend hours over a big pot of bolognese. And I really love my bed. It is never the same when I travel and have to sleep on a different mattress. And I enjoy days where I can stay there in my safe space with no concern for all of the chaos happening outside my door, in our nation, and in our world. It's quiet and comforting in my house. I like it there. And you probably do as well. But this is contrary to what God has called us to. And I think Jesus is asking, will you choose to stay in your safe space, or will you leave that space and walk into a hurting world that needs to be healed, to do the work that God has called you to? Wow, I can hear that person saying, maybe being a disciple of Jesus is a greater commitment than I thought. A second person meets them on the road and also wants to follow Jesus. So Jesus calls them to follow. But when Jesus calls them, they have one caveat, just one other priority ahead of Jesus. Jesus, they say, I want to follow you, but let me bury my father first, then I will follow you. This seems like a pretty reasonable request. The person has just one task that needs to be done, a responsibility that feels pretty important. They just need to prioritize their things and get this done so they'll be ready to follow. But it feels like we see a different side of Jesus that we don't frequently see as he replies, let the dead bury the dead. Nothing is more important than following me, Jesus says. Now go and proclaim the kingdom of God. Where is your compassion, Jesus? Once again, here's what I think Jesus is really asking. Do you love your family too much? Sometimes it is difficult to be a part of a family, and that includes this one. Sometimes it is really good and really easy. You don't want anything to change, so you carefully hold it and protect it at all costs. And it is possible to love your family so much that you put all of your energy and focus there and forget about the calling to love God's larger family, to care for the world, for the earth. We focus all of our energy and compassion inward, and there is nothing left to care for the world. But when we come to Jesus, when we accept this call to follow, our priorities change. The way we used to do things is no more. Nothing is to block the pursuit of discipleship, and nothing is to postpone its start. Even our best excuses will be rejected. Jesus is inviting us to revision how we see our discipleship, how we see this journey with Jesus. It is costly to follow Jesus. Our lives will be flipped upside down. Ouch, I can hear this person saying, maybe being a disciple of Jesus is a greater commitment than I thought. Finally, a third person comes, meets them on the road, and says, Lord, I will follow you, but let me say goodbye to my family. I am willing to follow you, Lord, this person says, but there's a string attached. And to this person, Jesus gives a warning. No one who puts a hand to the plow and looks back is fit for service in the kingdom of God. When you follow me, there is no procrastinating. There is no looking back. You can't put off God's kingdom to tomorrow, so seize the day. There's no longing for your old life. We don't plow very much these days, but we do drive. And every one of us in here who drives knows that it's not a good idea to be focused behind you while you're driving. You could swerve out of your lane, you could cause an accident, you could crash. Your eyes need to be focused on what is ahead of you. If you don't keep your eyes on the one you're following, if you don't keep your eyes on God's love, you can hurt yourself and others. Seek first the kingdom of God. Remember the Israelites when they left Egypt? God had just freed them from Pharaoh, and just a couple weeks later, they're grumbling about how great life in slavery was. They remembered their beds and their food with such affection that they conveniently forgot the part that they were enslaved. They forgot that their baby boys were thrown into a river. When you leave your old life, you cut it off so that you can follow Jesus. So there's no turning back now. You are called to be unwavering in your commitment to the kingdom of God, pressing forward as we continually follow Jesus. I can hear that person saying, maybe being a disciple of Jesus is a greater commitment than I thought. 3 people have a desire to follow Jesus, and 3 times Jesus pushes back. Jesus says that they're not fully in. Everything is second to following Jesus. We must go everywhere that Jesus leads. Jesus must come before our comforts, before our obligations and duties, as we journey with Jesus, never looking back at the life we left behind. And I think this is the question that Jesus is asking you and I as well. Will you follow Jesus all the way? Perhaps being a faithful follower is harder than we originally assumed. Discipleship, it seems, requires as much intention and focus as leadership. At first glance, we want to be like the first follower, to willingly follow wherever Jesus leads. But blind following doesn't embody the fullness of God's call or carry a full understanding of the cost. The second 2 seem to understand there's a cost and are looking for a middle road, desiring the best of both worlds. And at first glance, Jesus seems a little uncaring or dismissive. But Jesus is journeying towards Jerusalem now, with a clear understanding of his call to follow God, even to the point of death. Jesus is living by example the depth of following that requires your full self, a kind of following that will require great sacrifice, but will offer abundant life and grace that will make the sacrifice worth the journey. This is the discipleship that Jesus calls each one of us to. The fullness of life that we have been promised, this kingdom of God that brings justice and peace and love, does not just come about by happenstance. Discipleship costs us because it requires our dedication and obedience to God. Discipleship offers us a place in the story of God. It gives us an experience of grace and mercy as we leave everything and follow. Following is not flashy, and you're not going to put it on your social media. There's nothing attractive that you can add to your resume. You won't gain fame or money or power. In fact, you'll have to let go of those things. You won't even be remembered by the world because the one who is following is not as important as the one who we are following. But following Jesus provides a way to shape our lives into the image of God so that we can participate in this kingdom of God here with open hearts and open minds and open hands. Jesus invites his disciples into his mission as he sends a wave of them to travel further ahead, announcing God's kingdom. Luke shows us that being a disciple from the beginning meant participating in the kingdom mission of Jesus and making it our own. Theologian Dr. George Caird said this: "The most difficult choices in life are not primarily between good and evil. The most difficult choices in life are between what is good and what is best." A few chapters later, in Luke 14, Jesus tells a story. There once was a woman who threw a great dinner party. She hired the best chef in town, picked the best wines from the vineyards, and decorated her home with the prettiest flowers and finest linens. She was ready to celebrate, so she invited many people from the community, all of her friends and neighbors, even the mayor and the town council people. When it was time to have the party, she sent out her assistant to invite all the guests. But one by one, every one of them declined the invite, making all sorts of excuses. One person said, "I just bought a house and I need to look at the contracts. Please send my regrets." Another said, "I have a new job and life is so busy. I'll catch the next party." Another person told the assistant, "I have a full week with my hobbies and extracurriculars and friends and all of these wonderful things that are so important to me. I just don't have time in my schedule. Maybe next time." And still another person said, "I'm a newlywed and I need to get home because we're still unpacking and decorating. Let's try again later." Every single person that she invited had an excuse. So the assistant went back to the woman and told her what happened, and she was angry. The food was about to be served, and there was no one to enjoy it. So she told her assistant, "Quick, go downtown and find anyone who's available. That homeless person on the corner, invite them. The college student studying in library, they need a meal. The addict at the community home, bring them back too. The disabled man at the store, make sure they know there's a seat for them." So the assistant did. And when she came back, she said, "Look, boss, I did what you said, but the table's only half full. So head out to the country and bring back anyone you can find," the woman said. "Anyone needing a meal, anyone who doesn't fit in, anyone who needs a place to belong. Anyone who is down and out, I want my table full. And here's the thing, I know who I originally invited, and they all declined. They will not get even a bite at my dinner party." May you accept the invitation to make Jesus' mission your own. And even knowing what comes next in the journey, may you have the courage to keep moving forward as you journey with Jesus. May we all take a seat at a crowded table. Amen.